Welcome back to Pod Save the World. I'm Tommy Vitor.
I'm Ben Rhodes.
Welcome back, buddy. Of course, every single thing that we focus on and record and talk about here at Pod Save the World is exploding over the Thanksgiving holiday.
I know. It was like one battle after another over Thanksgiving.
It's like World O City.
Couldn't keep up with the content. Yeah.
My mom, Hannah's like, could you please put your phone down? No, I'm sorry. I'm reading about Steve Wickoff. It's very important.
I'm working.
I'm working.
Yeah.
I'm tweeting.
I'm working and eating over here.
I'm tweeting over here.
And I can't eat as much as I used to. I mean, I have this recollection of being able to eat like portion after portion, and now I just kind of run out of room at a certain point.
I don't stop. The thing that is crazy to me is that we all used to go out as hard as humanly possible Wednesday night.
That was the big night.
Before the biggest eating day of the year.
Yeah.
Why?
Made a lot of sense at the time.
Didn't we get hungover?
We did, and but you used to be able to eat a lot when you're hungover, and now you just lie in a prone position and
just sit there and want to
take an edible and wait.
Think about your life, think about your parenting decisions. Wonder why you're up at 5:30.
Wonder why your child woke you up at 5:30 and wants to do a puzzle.
James loves to be up, even before, even when the clock is in the 4 a.m. hour. He likes to just sort of chirp.
Yeah,
let me know what's going on. Anyway, it's great to be back. It's great to see you in person. We have a wild show, a lot to cover today.
Big show.
We're going to talk about this scandal engulfing Secretary of War, I hate saying that, Pete Hegseth, and reports that he personally ordered an airstrike that is about as clear-cut an example of a war crime as you can get. Yeah. We're also going to update you on the latest Trump on-again, off-again regime change war with Venezuela, his shocking pardon of the former president of Honduras, who was sentenced to 45 years in prison for conspiring with drug traffickers, including El Chapo himself. Not like the low level.
No, like
not the no-name
former
one.
Sean Penn interview.
Like A-list.
Yeah. A-list narco-terrorist.
Narco-terrorist. We're going to fill you in on the latest Russia-Ukraine peace talks and how corruption allegations in the U.S. and Ukraine are impacting these talks in a big way. We're also going to detail the fallout from this horrible shooting of 2 National Guard members in D.C., specifically how it's being used to cut off legal immigration to the United States and to punish basically anyone from Afghanistan. And we'll explain the background of the shooter who fought alongside U.S. personnel against the Taliban, these so-called zero units. And then we got some really fascinating stories out of South Africa. And then we're going to end with our bestest boy, Kash Patel.
Our bestest FBI director.
Bestest,
I'm torn between
boy.
Whether I want him to be fired or whether we need him for content.
For content purposes, I think it'd probably be good for the country to have a competent leader in that place. And then, Ben, you did our interview today.
I did. A fascinating interview. I talked to Julia Loktev, who's the director of My Undesirable Friends, which is a new...
My friends from high school.
Yeah. The ones you saw over Thanksgiving break,
I'm
sure.
Kidding. My friends from high school are great.
It's a great title, actually. I thought it was a great title. What Julia did is she basically embedded with a number of independent Russian journalists in the lead up to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And it's filmed with an iPhone. It's very intimate. You see them kind of going about their lives, going about their work at the same time that there's this massive crackdown where they're being labeled foreign agents. Mm-hmm. And in addition to being joined by Julia, I was really lucky to be joined by Ksenia Mironova, who is one of the journalists who's got a really harrowing story that is shown in the film. Her partner, her fiance, was detained and essentially disappeared. He's also a journalist, and he's serving a 22-year sentence in Russia right now. Ksenia is now in the United States. And we just talk about the challenges of being a journalist, obviously, in Russia.
I can't even imagine.
Why Putin did this crackdown, what lessons there are in it for the United States, given where we are on the authoritarian spectrum over here. So really, really fascinating.
We are pretty far along. What's on your thumb? Do you vote in the Iraqi parliamentary elections? What's going on there?
So for the
Union?
YouTube viewers, I cut my finger today, and the only Band-Aids we have are child's Band-Aids.
Is that a bluey Band-Aid?
So I have a Halloween Band-Aid of some sort. This is a kind of,
it's like a starry
I can't
night.
tell if it's like a spider web with stars on it. So yes, this is why you should subscribe to the Pod Save the World YouTube channel.
This is the good shit
This
you
is
get.
the kind of content you get.
Yeah.
My child's Band-Aid on my little cut finger.
I do want to thank the several thousand people that subscribe to the Pod Save the World YouTube. Yeah. We are cranking out lots of bonus content. Again, we did one on Jonathan Pollard, this spy who got a meeting at the U.S. Embassy. We did one on the Ukraine peace deal. And when you subscribe or when you like these videos or when you comment, it actually tells the YouTube algorithm to push them to other people so they find the show. Yeah. So thank you for subscribing. We greatly appreciate it. All right, Ben, should we talk about our boy Pete Hegseth?
The Secretary
Pistol
of War.
Pete.
Yes.
I can't say Secretary of War. It makes you feel so stupid.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we're living in the stupidest timelines.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we have talked a lot on the show about the administration's airstrikes on these boats in the Caribbean and in the Pacific Ocean. So Trump says this is part of a war on drug cartels. He calls them narco-terrorists. In practice, the U.S. military is just murdering people who the administration claims are drug traffickers. They don't really know. 83 people in 21 airstrikes, to be exact. But a new report from the Washington Post now has members of Congress from both parties demanding more detail about this policy and asking whether Pete Hegseth himself is guilty of war crimes. The specific incident they are focused on was the first one of these counter-narcotic strikes that happened on September 2nd. It killed 11 people. At the time, remember, Trump put out this brief clip of the airstrike on Truth Social. He said the people killed were Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists. And then a few days later, The Intercept reported a bunch more details about the strike itself, specifically that the boat had spotted the surveillance drones following them, turned back towards shore, and then the U.S. military hit them anyway with a first drone strike that didn't kill everyone on board, and then a second strike killed the remaining survivors. So the Washington Post reported that Admiral Bradley, who at the time was the head of Joint Special Operations Commander, JSOC, ordered that second double tap strike because he had been given a verbal directive from Pete Hegseth to, quote, kill everybody. So, Ben, just to be clear here, I believe that these airstrikes are illegal no matter what. So it's weird that we're kind of debating whether the double tap strike is illegal. But even if the whole thing was on the up and up, ordering a second drone strike to kill defenseless people floating on wreckage is a war crime.
It's a war crime.
It is in fact shooting at defenseless sailors after a U-boat strike was the textbook example of a war crime from World War II. So the law says basically when a soldier is hurt or sick or surrenders or is rendered defenseless, it's a war crime to kill them and you have to rescue them. Initially, the Pentagon denied the story. They called the Post story fabricated, inflammatory, and derogatory. Then on Sunday, Trump got asked about the report.
A lot of big words to those guys.
A lot of big words, a lot of syllables there. And so Trump gets asked Sunday, and he's like, I guess I believe Pete, but also I wouldn't have wanted that, not that second strike. Then Monday, Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, reads this prepared statement that says Hegseth authorized the strikes, but then she pointed her finger down the chain of command at the head of JSOC, Admiral Bradley, and said Bradley was, quote, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed. And then later on Monday, Hegseth tweeted about Bradley saying, quote, I stand by him and the combat decisions he has made on the September 2nd mission and all other since. So some very subtle finger pointing from Pete there. On Tuesday, Ben, Trump and Hegseth were asked about the strike at a cabinet meeting. Here's some of what they said.
President Trump always has our back. We always have the back of our commanders who are making decisions in difficult situations, and we do in this case.
Pete didn't know about second attack having to do with two people, and I guess Pete would have to speak to it. I can say this, I want those boats taken out, and if we have to, we'll attack on land also.
I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do. And by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision. I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war. This is what you in the press don't understand.
I hear Colombia, the country of Colombia, is making cocaine. They have cocaine manufacturing plants, okay? And then they sell us their cocaine. We appreciate that very much. But yeah, anybody that's doing that and selling it into our country is subject to attack.
So not necessarily just Venezuela?
No, not just Venezuela, no. We're taking those son of a bitches out, yeah.
Just learned that Colombia is manufacturing cocaine. So just to try to put a button on this long sordid story. So previously the administration said the second strike was necessary to get rid of a navigation hazard and sink the boat. Then they said it was self-defense because I guess these two people floating in the water are going to take out a Reaper drone or whatever is floating above them. We should note that the New York Times reported out a slightly different version of events after the Post, which is that Hegseth ordered a strike to kill the people on the boat and destroy its cargo, sink the vessel. But he didn't say, if there are survivors, kill them too, which is an important distinction just in terms of criminality here. So let's pause there, Ben. I mean, how much trouble do you think Hegseth and Bradley are in here? And how subtle did you find his attempt to point the finger at his subordinates?
So that to me is the headline of this whole thing, is that they know they got caught committing murder.
Yeah.
You know, they are acting like people that are guilty of murder because they are.
Yeah.
And Trump is furiously distancing himself from this. I wouldn't have taken the shot. I had nothing to do with it. Hegseth furiously, after, posting snuff videos and chest pounding about these boats. Oh, I didn't, the commander did this, but I back up the commander, but I had nothing to do with it. I walked out the room. I had another meeting. The whole world is watching video evidence of a war crime. And it's a sign, too, that even Pete Hegseth, not the, Pistol Pete's not the sharpest guy that we've had in the job, is aware that he's going to have a life after Donald Trump is there to protect him. This is becoming an increasingly common thread with this group, that they're aware that there's some accountability that may be on the horizon for them. Now, let's just pause and go back to the core issue of why these strikes are wrong. They're illegal, right? Even if they don't do the double tap strike, there's no domestic legal authorization for this. We've talked about this. There's no act of Congress. Even if you didn't like the drone strikes, we've said there's an act of Congress authorizing use of force against al-Qaeda. There is no such domestic law authorizing use of force against drug traffickers. Under international law, there's no imminent threat posed by these boats, right? The hundreds and hundreds of miles from the United States, trafficking maybe cocaine, but they're not, providing any evidence of this. Maybe that could go somewhere else too. It may not even come in the United States. So this is just, there's no legal basis for any of this. The reason that the double tap strike is a particularly egregious war crime is because when people, I think the people driving the boats to begin with are not exactly posing a threat, but when people are not fighting back and they're at risk and they're, trying to surrender, they're not putting up a fight, you are obligated to capture those people, to help those people even. And we went through this, by the way, in Gaza, why you can't just blow up whole buildings, right? And for people who don't think those are important, I just go through the few reasons. Number one, it's wrong to just kill people when you don't need to kill them. If you're fighting in a war, if you're on the front line in Ukraine and you're trading fire, that's like legal use of force. If you're there's vulnerable people hanging onto a boat and you kill them, well, that's just wrong. And those people could be innocent too. But secondly, if you needed another reason, that should be enough. Our troops, U.S. troops, depend on these laws. If these laws go away, how would you feel if it was American troops with their hands up, trying to surrender, getting double tapped and killed instead of being captured and ultimately exchanged or released to their families, right? So our military has traditionally been a huge proponent of following the laws of war, particularly in circumstances when people are trying to surrender, because they know that there have been times and there will be times in the future when those will be Americans. So this is wrong morally, it's wrong legally, it's also wrong for our national security, for the security of our troops. If these laws of war are just out the window, it's going to come back and boom, the chickens are going to come home to roost, to quote the former pastor of our former boss, And so it just, to me, so many threads come into this story, because there's the abuse of power, then there's the why are we there and the regime change piece in Venezuela that we'll get to. And then there's also, remember the fact that this is why they're at war with like Mark Kelly, because the Democrats in Congress were telling those service members, hey, if you commit an illegal act, if you were ordered to do something illegal, like kill these people in a double attack strike, you could be held accountable. You don't have to do that. You follow the Constitution, not an illegal order. And so a lot of things converge in this story. It's why it's a really big and important story.
It's a big and important story. And clearly those 6 members of Congress made that video because they knew about this incident, right? This was the first one of these strikes, remember. And Hegseth is such a preening fuck that he had to go on. He went on Fox News like the day after, was bragging about how he watched it live and how he was personally engaged and he knew all the intelligence. But everyone, like I remember talking to people you and I worked with in the Obama administration, like in the days after that first strike, who were saying to me, like, there were 11 people on that boat. Why would you have 11 people on a drug runner boat, right? Like there was probably some human trafficking. There was probably innocent people who may have been those survivors. And like you said, like the whole policy is illegal, full stop. There's probably a legal difference for Hegseth in terms of his future and culpability between him saying you have the authority to kill everyone on that boat, with him being like, kill everyone on that boat, or seeing survivors and being like, kill those people. But again, like this is all greatly complicated by the fact that he watched this live, I guess. And then just bigger picture, Pete Hegseth is so obviously trying to fuck over his direct reports, the head of JSOC at the time. And that is just not going to go over well at the Pentagon or really anywhere in the military. Like the buck is supposed to stop with him. He's the leader.
These people, by the way, that guy, I guarantee you, I don't know anything about that guy. That guy is not a Democrat. The
right.
commander of JSOC.
Yeah.
Just going to go out on a limb,
No,
right?
no.
So but this is going to be a problem for them because, one, those people know that they might face accountability. But two, I mean, you and I were talking offline about this. Imagine if Barack Obama went out and just blamed, down the chain of command. They are going to start to run into a challenge. I mean, I remember this, every administration comes in and their highest moment is the first day, right?
That half day too.
That half day of inauguration where
Yeah.
everybody's kissing your ass. It seems like you're going to be there forever. It seems like you can do anything. Everybody wants a job, so they're being really nice to you. And that capital just diminishes throughout the time that you're in office.
Yep.
Donald Trump is trying to buck gravity by talking about how he might run for a third term. He's not. The guy's old, right? We're going to be through. We might go through some shit here with the midterms and whatever happens. I'm not suggesting it's gonna be easy.
Can't stay awake through a cabinet meeting.
But the point is that these soldiers and SEALs and special operators and FBI agents know they're going to have a life after Trump, and these fuckers are just passing the buck for all the crimes that they're committing down the chain. That is going to create some real tensions inside the military.
Mhm.
And that's why they were so thin-skinned about that video, because the people like Jason Crow and Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin, they know that.
Yes.
And so that hit the target.
Yep.
The reason they freaked out like they did, and they're trying to court-martial Mark Kelly, is because they know that they're speaking directly to people that are listening.
Absolutely right. Yeah, just a few other things. I'm sure, like me, you went deep on this policy debate after this, Hegseth story posted. I hadn't realized that the Washington Post reported that the White House initially asked the CIA to conduct these drone strikes on the boats through its covert action authorities, but the CIA's lawyers were like, I don't know that there's any possible self-defense argument, and they didn't want to do it. And then Stephen Miller wanted to be able to make the snuff films public, which sort of belies the whole idea that you would do it covertly. So they passed it over to DOD. And the Post also reported that the deputy director at the CIA had to become the acting general counsel and then be the one who ultimately approved CIA's participation in the policy, because the career lawyers were, again, this is crazy. This is just murder. And so, Ben, to your point about Admiral Bradley, between this strike and today, Admiral Bradley was promoted from the head of JSOC to the head of U.S. Special Operations Command. So they're now pointing the finger at him and being like, he is the one to blame. If you're going to, Congress, if you're going to, call someone up to the hill, it's that guy. But they loved him until a couple days ago when the Post reported this story. And then, I think you and I talked about this at the time. On October 6th, there was another strike that had some survivors. Those survivors were picked up and then returned to their home countries. They weren't even prosecuted. So clearly they were shaken by this first strike. They knew they did the wrong thing, and they changed the policy going forward. And that is also reportedly when Admiral Halsey, who's the head of Southern Command, who's retiring early, got in some big fight with Raisin Kane, Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I think about this policy maybe about this question of survivors. And now he's leaving only a year into the job, I think with the end of December. There's just lots of interesting data points in the public domain that have shown smoke and fire along the way about the problems here.
Yeah. And if you have no, again, credible legal basis, which they have not even presented, domestically or internationally, and then you have a video of people being killed after the strike had already hit the target, that's why they had all the meetings, because they already knew they were on a shaky legal basis. You already had lawyers that reportedly had said no to this, right? And multiple agencies, because they also got rid of the JAGs, the lawyers of the Defense
Cleaned house
Department,
early
right?
on.
Cleaned house there. So they already knew that they were on pretty tenuous footing, in part because Stephen Miller wanted to make the snuff videos, right? So this is their own hubris coming back on them. It's always hubris that brings people down.
Yep.
Clearly, the flurry of this activity, flurry of these meetings. But what they can't change is the fact that they killed those people, and that there's video evidence of those people being killed. And that's never going to go away, no matter what they do.
Yeah.
And the rats can scurry off the ship here, not to be a little too, but we all know what we saw, and we all know that they can't explain why it's legal. And that's why they say, by the way, the other thing I want to point out in that clip you played, then they pivot to like those sons of bitches, this kind of dehumanizing bravado bullshit. When Donald Trump's not a tough guy,
No.
you know. Pete Hegseth, like, give me a break, you know? They hide behind that because they have no argument to make for why they're blowing up these boats.
Yeah, and I do think in that clip too, Hegseth kind of showed you who he really is. I mean, remember, this is a guy who spent a lot of time defending someone named Eddie Gallagher, who was a Navy SEAL who was accused by his own men of horrific war crimes, just like sniping innocent kids. And Hegseth like put a lot of political capital into defending him. Also, Ben, I saw Senator Rand Paul, Republican, posted a letter from the Coast Guard that said between September 1st, 2024 and October 7th, 2025, Coast Guard vessels interdicted 212 suspected drug smuggling vessels at sea headed towards the U.S. 41% of them had no illicit contraband on board at all. I'm not sure if contraband means drugs or like anything the Coast Guard deemed illegal, but either way, at least 20% of these boats had no drugs. So if that is the error rate with these drone strikes, that's pretty bad.
We're just murdering, if that's the case, and, you know, we don't know because they provide no evidence. We were just killing potentially like fishermen, you know, or people just on a boat. And look, then when you challenge them on that, Trump says, oh, you know, there are not any boats to hit anymore. Well, guess what there is? There's still fucking cocaine in the United States.
Right.
Like, what did they end drug trafficking?
No.
Like, these boats are achieving nothing. Other than a big show that Stephen Miller and Pete Hegseth like to put on X, you know, and seem like tough guys.
Yep. So I'm glad Republicans and Democrats in Congress are both outraged. Hopefully we'll have real hearings, real investigations. Of course, like Pete Hegseth posts this like Franklin the Turtle meme of like a turtle firing a machine gun. Like he's just a moron.
I didn't know that. Do you think that? I wonder if this stuff is starting to wear thin even with some of their own people, because it's the Franklin the Turtle thing, which is just thirsty.
That was not a good swing, sir. No one knows that.
But this is why he was the weekend anchor at Fox and Friends.
That's right.
The guy couldn't even carry the fucking weekday.
No, he was too drunk.
Yeah.
Okay, so that disaster we just talked about could just be like a little war crime amuse-bouche for the entree that is a regime change war with Venezuela. Trump has been threatening Venezuela for a while now, as we've discussed. He's put all these naval assets in the region. There's something like 15,000 troops down there in the Caribbean. But there is still some hope that Trump is looking for a diplomatic off-ramp. On November 21st, Trump reportedly spoke with President Maduro in a call that the Miami Herald says was arranged by Brazil, Qatar, and Turkey. Interesting group. Again, Qatar. Turkey.
Qatar was, they've been involved in Venezuela. They brokered some release of prisoners. Those guys are negotiators.
They're just everywhere.
They're like Witkoffian, and they're negotiating.
This call was right before the State Department officially labeled Maduro the head of the Cartel de los Soles, which is a group, as we discussed last week, that doesn't actually exist. It's what Venezuelan journalists call corrupt members of the military. So according to Reuters, Maduro told Trump he was willing to leave Venezuela if he and his family got full legal amnesty, all sanctions removed, and if the U.S. stopped the case against Maduro at the ICC, to which we said, sorry, Maduro, we only block ICC justice for Israeli war criminals, sir. So Maduro also wanted sanctions removed from more than 100 Venezuelan officials, and he wanted his VP to run Venezuela until there were new elections, which of course would be free and fair, as we know. Yeah. So Trump reportedly said, no, actually, you have a week to get the hell out of the country. Best of luck. Call me back. So that call didn't go great. That 1 week deadline for Maduro to leave was Friday. On Saturday, Trump posted this message, which said, quote, to all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, they should consider Venezuelan airspace closed. And then in a call with troops on Thanksgiving, Trump indicated that ground operations in Venezuela could begin, quote, very soon. So happy
Thanksgiving, guys. Yeah.
Happy holidays, guys. Enjoy some turkey and a new war.
By the way, what happened to the Thanksgiving deadline and the war in Russia?
It feels like that one must have slipped too.
Yeah,
almost slipped a little bit too. As we know, we discussed, the Trump administration recently doubled the bounty on Maduro's head to $50 million. Trump was supposed to have some like kind of cabinet level meeting on Monday to figure out next moves. We don't know what happened there. Meanwhile, in Caracas, Maduro hosted a rally on Monday where he danced on stage and called for peace, saying, quote, we do not want a slave's peace nor the peace of colonies. Colony never, slaves never. The New York Times had this interesting piece, Ben, about how Maduro's upping a security game. He's changing where he sleeps. He's swapping out cell phones. He's also leaning very heavily, apparently, on Cuban bodyguards and Cuban intelligence support, which is sort of interesting detail, all while trying to be chill in public. So I guess we'll continue to hurry up and wait. I mean, at the risk of asking you the same question like 6 weeks in a row, any signs you're seeing that Trump's leaning one way or the other? And did you catch the Politico story over the Thanksgiving break about all the Republicans in Miami saying they will never lose Florida again if Trump just deposes Maduro.
I did see that,
real
actually.
long-term
It's a little
thinking
bit of
there.
a trigger. A good reason to go to war. Good reason to invade a country and overthrow its government and it put at risk thousands of lives, well, hundreds of thousands of lives in Venezuela and American service members, et cetera. Put that aside, the kind of crass, offensive stupidity of that being a reason to go to war. I guess what I'd say is I was interested by and concerned by the flurry of leaks, right, including this phone call, because look, part of what's so strange here is Trump cannot explain why we might go to war in Venezuela. He just cannot. And we've said this before, but it's not drugs. They're not a major source of drugs coming to the United States. That's a bullshit. Then we'd be invading China, Mexico, and Colombia. It's just not about drugs. It's clearly about this weird mixture of ideology and Florida politics and oil and a lot of things. And, he wanted him out the first time and couldn't get him out. Because he can't explain it, I keep thinking, is he really going to do this? It'd be pretty insane for all the reasons we've detailed. But what worries me about this is this almost felt like the kind of thing you do when you're going to go to war. We made one last phone call, we offered him an off-ramp, it was they were leaking too that we, invited him to the United States for a meeting. Pretty clearly he was going to be arrested if he came to the United States.
Come on, buddy.
Pretty obvious where Maduro's going to end up in the jail cell that the Honduran guy just...
Come have dinner. Come to Mar-a-Lago. Have a cake.
Yeah. So that's what made me nervous is we're going through these motions and doing things ultimatums. This is kind of... felt like before the war in Iraq. Remember, it was 48 hours to give up all the weapons of mass destruction that they didn't have. And, so...
And these things take on a momentum and a life of their own, even when the leaders don't want there to be a conflict.
And look, we've seen Trump have the ability to just ignore his own deadlines. I mean, we've had 5 or 6 to end the war in Ukraine, as I just alluded to.
2 weeks for a healthcare plan in 2015.
Yeah, he's got a lot of chips on the table now too. He's promised to get rid of this guy, and he's threatened to bomb them on land multiple times, and so I just think that they keep believing there's some way to do this on the cheap. That they've got, again, I've said this before, but I would imagine there's some special forces guys in the country. They got some CIA people doing stuff, some sabotage. They're trying to get the opposition to maybe do it themselves. But Maduro, man, he's a stubborn guy, and his whole existence is tied up. I mean, if he leaves, he's dead.
What is he?
Or in prison, and that's not who he's going to be. I mean, I don't say this with any admiration. I just say this I remember I met with him once. I was at the Summit of the Americas in 2015, and Obama had an interaction with him backstage. We did it somewhere where there were no photographers, and part of this was just we had want to just make first contact here and see if we can begin to try to address some of the huge issues. And I just remember him saying over and over again, "I'm a revolutionary," and and I remember what? Kind of believing it, and not in a good. It doesn't justify. It's a fucking dictator,
Right.
But I think he's an ideologue, and I think he okay, if he's gonna go out in a blaze of glory, he'll be that kind of guy more than the Assad kind of guy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll get on a plane and go to Havana or something, in which case that'll probably be the next target for invasion.
Yes, for sure.
But it feels like a lot of momentum and a lot of and Trump, by the way, I'm not in the distraction crowd, as you know, but because I think everything they do matters. But when you're losing altitude, I mean, if we study the authoritarian playbook, when your numbers are slipping below 40% and people are stopping following some of your orders, and some Republicans are beginning to jump ship, this is when autocrats start wars.
Sometimes you just got to bomb some shit. Yeah, Maduro was a bus driver, then he was a union activist, then he was a member of Chavez's party, and he was vice president, and then became president. I think you're right that he's an ideologue. Also, I mean, his life has been this project. He's not done anything else, and he's propped up by corruption and the structure that he built under himself. I don't think he's ever been seen as the brightest bulb or the most charismatic person. What was the book that Chavez gave Obama?
It was a Noam Chomsky. It was a Noam Chomsky book. Yeah,
that's cool.
But this is, I mean,
he gives him a subscription to The Intercept.
yeah. There was no drop site yet. Sorry, we love you guys.
So here's a Dissent magazine. No, we're readers. So we're readers.
But no, it was interesting because Chavez was compelling, charismatic, smart.
Yeah.
Maduro's
fiery speaker.
None of those things. But what's important about that is, as Maduro has lost the support of the people, he is consolidated and maintained control because of the military.
Right.
So he's become far more of a military dictator than Chavez was, which is actually why this will be harder than Trump thinks. Because the military is in on this project. They're in on the corruption. They're in on all the things.
Yeah, and Maria Machado will not be keeping them around if she comes in.
No.
Okay, so the other shocking development this past week was Trump's decision to pardon the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernández. We're going to call him JOH for short sometimes because it's just easier. So Hernández was convicted in federal court last year of, quote, conspiring to import cocaine into the United States and conspiring to use heavy weapons to facilitate said drug trafficking. DOJ estimates that Hernández helped traffic 400 tons of cocaine into the U.S. over 20 years. That got him 45 years in prison. Also, he was accused of murdering a witness in prison. So, good guy. So, right as the Trump administration is arguing that the U.S. needs to invade Venezuela to depose the head of a corrupt narco state or murder random dudes in boats off the coast of Venezuela, Trump releases a different corrupt cartel-linked president from prison. Makes a lot of sense. So, JOH was president of Honduras from 2014 to 2022. I was talking with someone who, sort of worked in and out of the U.S. government, who worked with JOH during that period, who said, look, he sort of smelled dirty from the very beginning, in part because he had a very corrupt, very stupid brother, Tony Hernandez, who was also prosecuted for drug trafficking. Tony famously stamped some of the cocaine he manufactured with his initials on it. Just TH. So shockingly, that guy got arrested in 2018.
Oh, God.
And then JOH, also, a better politician, but not the brightest bulb because he was photographed at the 2010 World Cup with a known Honduran cartel boss. So folks knew this guy was a creep, is what I was saying. That said, both Barack Obama and Joe Biden, met with him, worked with him, praised him for reducing migration. And then the DEA was working closely with the Honduran government to try to stop the same drug traffickers that JOH was protecting. And then in 2017, when Hernandez blatantly stole an election to stay in power, the Trump administration recognized his victory. They basically strong-armed the OAS to shut up about any irregularities, and then Trump praised him as late as 2019, which was the year his brother was sentenced to life in prison. So this was a bad dude whose activities were pretty well known, which is why Hernandez is loathed in Honduras, because he stole from the people he was representing, and he facilitated the violence and the narco-terrorism that terrorized so many communities there, which is why, Ben, it seemed so politically crazy for Trump in the same Truth Social post to pardon JOH, but also endorse the candidate from his political party who was running in last Sunday's election, this guy, Tito Asfora, who's another right-winger. In fact, the post was literally a threat. Trump said, quote, "If he doesn't win, the United States will not be throwing good money after bad, because a wrong leader can only bring catastrophic results to a country," just like the kind of Argentina model of election interference. That election is basically tied as of this recording. There are a bunch of other kind of congressional races and mayoral races, but it's going to take some time to get a final tally. But Ben, I think the question is just, why on earth would Trump do this? We know that Roger Stone was like a big, supporter of this pardon. We know that JOH is popular with the crypto crowd because of this insane project he facilitated called Prospera, which is like this libertarian wasteland that like Peter Thiel and other crypto guys liked. But it was just like so shockingly corrupt that no one seems to understand it. It was sort of like unbelievable when I read it.
I think, first of all, Trump, and we've talked about this, but Trump likes to be the kind of emperor of the Western Hemisphere and pick the leaders, and, Milei has to win Argentina or else, and maybe I'll bomb Colombia because I don't like Petro, and I'm going to depose Maduro, and maybe I'll take the Panama Canal, and this guy who's a drug trafficker, well, because he's friends with some of my friends, he gets to go out of prison and elect his party. I actually just think he likes sitting on this like throne in the White House and, feeling like he runs this part of the world. Second, I think, and I don't know, but there are lots of reports about him having buddies, the JOH having buddies like Roger Stone. Look, this is just what seems inexplicable is actually quite simple. We are run by an incredibly corrupt autocrat who doesn't really give a fuck about anything other than his own power and his own money and his friends and their power and money. Yeah. And this guy had the right friends. He had some guy, I think like an operator in Florida, who's JOH probably had a lot of money stashed away that the feds couldn't get their hands on. Some of that money probably went to work. Again, just one man's view here, but you start paying Trump's associates, and then they start lobbying Trump, and then you get out of prison. We've seen this movie before. Yeah. All I want to say here is like, this gives up the game, to pardon a massive drug trafficker while you're bombing small boats that carry a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the initial stamped coke that was ravaging our streets from the H family, from the Hernandez family. And I don't know how many MAGA people listen to this podcast.
It's got to be one.
But we might have some, but we all have MAGA people in our lives. Please point to this as the example, if you can, of how fucking stupid Donald Trump thinks you are. That he thinks that he can stand up and tell you that he's blowing up boats illegally in the Caribbean because he's trying to stop drug trafficking while he's pardoning some rich drug trafficker at the same time. I mean, he's ending forever wars while he's starting another one. Like, how many times can this guy lie to you before your own eyes on things you care about? Drugs in our communities and forever wars. These are not like small side issues. These are issues that were core to Trump's politics. And he's showing these completely full shit on both of them.
Yeah, and like I have some random kind of MAGA world contacts that I talk to about stuff, and like sometimes we argue, but when I ask them about this or when I ask them about the Venezuela policy, all of them are like, I don't get it either, man. Yeah. We think it's crazy too. Speaking of which, man, let's watch this totally incoherent answer from Trump when asked about why he pardoned JOH.
President of Honduras, and he was released from prison
yesterday. Did. Well, he was the president, and they had some drugs being sold in their country, and because he was the president, they went after him. That was a Biden horrible witch hunt, which was, a lot of people in Honduras asked me to do that, and I did it. I feel very good about it. If you have some drug dealers in your country and you're the president, you don't necessarily put the president in jail for 45 years. That was a Biden-inspired witch hunt.
Did his letter impact your decision on that?
JOH said he would, quote, stuff the drugs up the gringos' noses, according to a witness. He took $1 million from El Chapo. Prosecutor said he was part of a 20-year scheme to bring 500 tons of cocaine to the United States. He was taking bribes from the smugglers to protect them from extradition to the U.S. Actually, that's a really important piece of this because, like, corruption and like kind of these drug cartels are so endemic in parts of Latin America. Sometimes the only way out of it is seen as like the U.S. justice system and extraditing these corrupt people to the United States. And for Trump to just pardon this guy and undo years and years of work by like the Southern District of New York and the Department of Justice and U.S. prosecutor, I think is going to make a lot of people in Latin America think, okay, well, now we have just no recourse, and the Americans are just full of shit. Like they don't actually care about the rule of law or interdicting drug shipments. They just care about money and their friends and politics and power.
And guess what it's going to foster? Drug trafficking.
Yep.
We're basically saying like you can get away with it. If you can just spread some money around Florida and some Trump associates, you have total impunity down there to do this very drug trafficking that we're apparently blowing up boats and having regime change wars to prevent. I mean, the message is, if you are in the Western Hemisphere, as long as you're a Trump-friendly right-wing autocrat, like you can do absolutely whatever the fuck you want.
Yep. Want to bail out?
And if you're, Petro in Colombia, whatever you think of him, he's not like a narco trafficker. But if you're that guy, then we may bomb your country, And I just think this is not. I guess they're betting that this is just how the world's going to be for 30 years, but I don't think it is. I think I really think the bill is going to come due for these guys, and because they're committing crimes out in the open, left and right.
Yeah, look, you're right. Like your best day in office is your first day.
Yeah.
Trump thinks he's riding high. Ultimately, it's a 50-50 country.
Yeah.
And like he is going to be slowly losing political support through this unbelievable corruption and all the things that they're fumbling here. And the fact they're not making any progress stopping fentanyl because no fentanyl is coming from Venezuela.
And I think, deep down, look, Stephen Miller cares. He's like a white supremacist nationalist who wants to like deport people and remake the country into his, image, whatever. Trump and some of these people, the profiteering may be the point. They like the power and they like, but they may just think we're going to make so much fucking money in the next 3 years. We're going to make trillions of dollars basically that we'll have impunity because we'll get to live where we, we'll live in Abu Dhabi,
Right.
Like seriously, I think that they're just looting the global system and that's, again, return to if you're a Navy SEAL or someone being asked to do something on behalf of these people, bear that in mind. These guys aren't even in on the white nationalist project. Like some of them are just in it for the buck.
Yep. Okay, we are going to take a quick break. But Ben, if you need some help on figuring out what to get your friends and your family this holiday season, I have a deal for you. If they love content, how about a Friends of the Pod subscription? It's the gift that keeps on giving. A Friend of the Pod subscription will keep you informed, entertained, and mostly sane. You get access to all the good stuff, exclusive content like Polar Coaster with Dan Pfeiffer, ad-free episodes of your favorite crooked shows, and endless bragging rights that you support independent, progressive media. Go to crooked.com/friends. Bragging rights, baby. I love independent media.
Just dunking on your friends.
Go to
corporate media friends.
Yeah, just dunk on those times subscribers. Gift a Friends of the Pod subscription. Grab one for yourself. Learn more at crooked.com/friends. Pod Save the World is brought to you by UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. Displacement is at its highest level since World War II. More people have been forced to flee than at any time in recorded history. UNHCR can reach only half of those facing life-threatening emergencies due to funding cuts. Humanitarian aid cuts are forcing UNHCR to make impossible choices about who receives help. As the war escalates in Ukraine, Sudan, and elsewhere, the number of refugees is at a record high, just as the help they need is vanishing. Sick children are suffering from dehydration and disease, and they can't get access to clean water. Sick and elderly populations are unable to get medical care. Families arrive at overcrowded camps where diseases like cholera are spreading. UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, has operations in over 130 countries worldwide. Donations are critical in funding aid to save lives across the globe. Once a donation is made, relief can reach refugees within 72 hours of an emergency. Just $37 provides an individual a winter survival kit with a blanket, sleeping mat, kitchen set, and plastic sheeting to insulate their home. $95 provides warm winter clothes for a child. $179 will provide a family without electricity a solar kit to light their home on the long, cold nights of winter. Donate at unrefugees.org/pod to help save lives. Help families survive the deadly winter ahead. Donate at unrefugees.org/pod. Pod Save the World is brought to you by Aura Frames. If you're looking for the perfect holiday gift, Aura Frames is the hidden gem that becomes the favorite gift long after the unwrapping is over. I have actually gifted a bunch of Aura Frames to members of my family. They all love it. It's especially great if you've got a new baby and you're constantly sending people pictures. You can update it there. You got a pet. You wanted a fun trip. Just keep people feeling close to you, in tune with what's going on in your life. There's a reason Aura Frames are one of the top-rated gifts for the holidays. It's recommended by Good Morning America, The Today Show, and they've been included on Oprah's Favorite Things 3 times. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag, so there's no gift wrapping necessary. Upload unlimited photos and video to your frame for free. Just download the Aura app and connect to Wi-Fi. It takes about 2 minutes to set up a frame using the Aura app. The app allows you to share photos and videos effortlessly at any time, straight from your phone. If you want to personalize your gift, you can add a message before it arrives. Don't wait. Win the holidays now with Aura Frames. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using the promo code WORLD at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code WORLD. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. We're going to get to Stephen Miller in 1 second, but first let's talk about these Ukraine talks and dig more into the corruption piece. So there's been a lot of activity since last week. As we are recording, Trump's golf buddy turned special envoy Steve Witkoff and then his dipshit corrupt son-in-law Jared Kushner are in Moscow meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I'm glad we sent our toughest, most intimidating guys to talk to Putin, Ben. So the vibes did not seem great as the talks started. Putin accused Europe of sabotaging the talks by changing the proposal so that it wasn't basically Russia's full wish list. He also said, quote, "We are not planning to fight with Europe, but if Europe suddenly starts a war with us, we are ready right now." So it's not a threat. Last week, we talked about the emergence of this 28-point so-called peace plan from Witkoff and Kushner that was just entirely tilted towards the Russians. That plan has since been shrunk down to 20 items, though Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is saying that the biggest issues like Ukrainian territory need to be negotiated directly by the leaders, which could be challenging because Trump is saying basically he wants a deal kind of wrapped up and handed to him before he'll meet with anyone else. But these talks in Moscow are happening right as Russia claims to have taken control over more territory in Ukraine, specifically the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk province. And then over in Ukraine, the corruption scandal we talked about last week has just further metastasize. On Friday, investigators raided the home of Andriy Yermak, who is Zelensky's closest aide. And he's a guy who's so powerful that he was basically considered like the deputy president. Yermak resigned from his post a few hours after this raid became public. The scandal involves Ukrainian officials stealing about $100 million from Ukraine's state energy company through kickbacks and other schemes. But we know there's more investigations in the defense sector happening. So we don't totally know what the raid was about. Yermak was hated by a lot of people. He was considered egotistical and an asshole and hoarding too much power. I remember there's an entire Politico story that someone pitched about just like what a dick he was. Yeah. But his departure leaves a huge void in Zelensky's political orbit. And Yermak had been the guy leading the peace talks with the Trump administration. So it's just not clear like what Zelensky's going to do here. Ben, last week we both kind of landed on the side of we didn't think Russia was going to take this deal because Putin has no real incentive to do so. Nothing's changed in my estimation. In fact, those comments from Putin kind of affirm that take. But I guess the question is whether Yermak's departure and the sense that Zelensky is kind of being consumed by this corruption scandal might force his hand in some way that we didn't see before. What do you think?
I think that, first of all, you cannot overstate the importance of Yermak. In talking to Europeans and Biden people, like he was, if not a co-president, about as close as you get to it. He was the guy that would talk to other national security advisors. He was the guy who would talk to other political advisors. He was always in the room with Zelensky. He was the gatekeeper to Zelensky if you wanted to meet with him. You couldn't get appointed to a ministry without kind of going through Yermak. Yermak ran this machine. And, Zelensky was the guy, and very much his own man. I'm not suggesting Zelensky was a puppet. I'm saying Zelensky was out there giving speeches and communicating relentlessly and traveling. But Yermak was the guy running the show, right? And actually, literally, he was a producer with Zelensky's show.
They lived in the same bunker together in the presidential palace. He never left. Yermak had no family, no life, no wife. Like this is all he did.
I mean, the famous video of Zelensky when he stayed in Kyiv, he's standing next to Yermak. And so losing him is losing his the levers that he pulled on everything from personnel to foreign relations. I don't know what he does without that. I don't know how you rebuild that.
Losing J.D. Vance.
Yeah. Like losing Marco Rubio. Something you don't even have an archivist.
Do you see Trump fall asleep when Rubio is talking at the cabinet meeting? Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
It's very enjoyable. And so there's not much to say about this deal. In fact, that clearly Witkoff got worked again. It's not the first time. It happened before the Alaska summit. Russians dangled a bunch of business opportunities in front of him, gave him a plan. He translated it into English. And then lo and behold, of course, nobody wants to take it. And then they amend the plan, and then Putin won't take it. I mean, we've been here before. I will say, and so I don't know. Maybe Zelensky's so weak that they kind of go back to a version of the Russian plan that gets forced on him. All I'll say is, I made this point last week that part of what Putin's doing here is he's weakening the U.S. from Europe, and he's weakening Zelensky through these talks. Like he's tactically doing that. I'm sure that these corruption scandals are true. I'm sure that in Ukraine, but I would assume they are. I would also assume that the prosecutors are well-intentioned in fighting corruption. It is a little conspicuous to me, not to, be on a conspiracy theory. We're not on the, all-in pod here. But the Russians are pretty good at making sure that the timing of how corruption scandals come out, right. I mean, this could not align better for them. That the plan comes out and then Yermak's the guy, then they take it. I mean, I'm just looking at this. This could not be orchestrated better. Like one mistake you could make when you don't like your adversaries is to think they're dumb. Like Putin and that crowd is many things. They're not fucking dumb. No, they're not. And it feels to me like they're running a very clear play here to weaken Zelensky and this was their original plan, by the way. They wanted just their own person in Ukraine, and they have this on every peace plan is there has to be an election right away because they think Zelensky will lose, right? And so it just feels to me like they're grinding down the Ukrainians. They're grinding them down on the battlefield. They're grinding them down diplomatically. And Europe is going to have to step in and really fortify the Ukrainian state here and Zelensky himself because right now it's a very precarious moment for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, they certainly ran like a longer game play on Donald Trump in the United States, right? I mean, the Ukraine envoy is supposed to be Keith Kellogg, who is like more of a hardliner. Shout out to the Wall Street Journal for doing some like deep dive, excellent reporting into all the corruption and kind of business elements of this peace process. Highly recommend everyone read it, but it will not be unfamiliar to listeners of this show. Basically, Putin knows that Trump doesn't give a shit about Ukraine, doesn't give a shit about Europe or values. He cares about like press releases that show big investment numbers and personally enriching himself and the people around him. So Putin tapped all his business crony buddies to go make contact with people like Witkoff and Jared Kushner and others and make that kind of the point of contact and the interlocutor. And so now you have the Kirill Dmitriev, the head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund, like dangling little deal opportunities in front of Witkoff and Kushner, and now those bozos are sitting in Moscow doing the deals, and like all of it's happening kind of semi off the books and outside the traditional government processes that ensure transparency or coordination or the involvement of experts. And so, like you, I'm very worried about this corruption we're reading about in Ukraine, but it's like we have this other staggering corruption from the Trump administration sitting right in front of our faces. It's hard to get past it.
The corruption is right in your face, right? We're going to do deals in the Arctic and we're going to Mars together, and Jared's going to, be buddies with the sovereign wealth fund guy. But again, I really want the listeners you do not have to be some expert to see how much the Russians are running fucking circles around the Trump people. Let me just give you one example. You mentioned Keith Kellogg, right? Keith Kellogg, conventional hawkish MAGA general, was supposed to be the envoy to Ukraine. The Russians said, we don't want to deal with that motherfucker, like he's too pro-Ukrainian. They forum shopped. They got Witkoff and Jared. They selected their envoys. What is the one thing Keith Kellogg has, quote unquote, accomplished in his role? He has somehow brought the Putin-friendly dictator of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, in from the cold, flew to Belarus, wrapped his arms, metaphorically at least, around Lukashenko.
You might have given him a hug.
Like, that is some, I hesitate to make the 5D chess point about fucking Putin, but somehow he engineered a situation where the Ukraine envoy became the Belarus envoy who brought the Belarusian autocrat, who's Putin's buddy, in from the cold. This is the caliber of diplomats that we're dealing with in the Trump administration vis-a-vis the Russians.
Did you see the Chinese foreign minister is at these talks in Moscow? It's like, I could totally see a role for the Chinese in diplomacy, but it was just like, what? Why? What is
another smart guy? Wang Yi, very smart guy.
Wang Yi,
right?
definitely there.
Suddenly they're buying the chips from NVIDIA. The Russians and Chinese have had a banner fucking year. Okay,
I gotta say too, just like big picture, I want this war over too. I would love to see a negotiated end to the war that, of course, as we talked about last week, will involve Ukraine giving up territory. But no one can explain why the proposal that Kushner and Witkoff drafted involves Ukraine giving up territory that the Russians aren't currently occupying. You know what I mean? It's like, that's one of those things. Like, no one can explain the Venezuela policy. No one can explain the JOH part. No one can explain why you would have to hand over the additional, 20% of Donetsk to the Russians.
Or what's in it for Americans to like do some deals in the Arctic with Russians.
And this is where it's so stupid. Like, the U.S.-Russia trading relationship was like not that significant before the war. The idea that like a bunch of American businesses are going to get a good deal making partnerships with companies in like one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. It's like, give me a fucking break.
Sell them some heavy machines, that's about it.
Yeah, we'll send them some Caterpillar machines. Of course, Jared Kushner can get rich.
Yeah, they have billions of dollars to spread around, which is the common thread of this show today.
Yeah. I'm sure listeners saw the horrific news last week about Ramanul Lakhanwal, who was an Afghan man who had fought in a CIA-backed and trained military unit in Afghanistan, who then shot 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C., killing one of them. This was just a horrific tragedy and one that's going to have huge implications, both for U.S. immigration policy, but is also yet another sort of indication of like the long and devastating tale of the war in Afghanistan. So just first on the immigration part, Ben, the administration has already stopped all visa and immigration processing for anyone from Afghanistan. They paused asylum cases for basically all nationalities, and they even ordered a review of green card cases from any of the 19 countries subjected to Trump's travel ban, i.e. the policy we all once called a Muslim ban. And then on top of that, on Tuesday, CNN reported that Kristi Noem, the dog murderer running the Department of Homeland Security, has recommended that Trump expand the travel ban to 30 countries total. So we're just, blowing up any ability to come here if you're not like a white European from South Africa or whatever. The incident has also led to more scrutiny of these military units in Afghanistan called Zero units, which were elite military units that fought alongside and on behalf of the United States in Afghanistan. They are often described as the CIA's private army or secret army in Afghanistan. The Zero units were trained by U.S. Special Forces. They were tasked with some of the most sensitive and dangerous missions in the war, like going after al-Qaeda or ISIS leaders. And the irony of this crackdown, Ben, on asylum applications and this debate about, like, was this guy vetted or not, is that Zero unit members were basically the most thoroughly vetted people possible. Like, if you think about it, like, these guys were trusted to go on night raids every single night, armed alongside U.S. personnel, and they never had one of those insider threat, like green on blue incidents. And to get into a Zero unit, you had to be recommended by a family member or a friend, like someone had to vouch for you. So that said, like, these Zero unit members, they've been accused of some of the worst human rights abuses in the war, executions, torture, civilian casualties, like really awful stuff. And the Zero units were detested in many parts of Afghanistan and accused of turning the population against the coalition forces because of these abuses. But again, they were vetted. They clearly fought on behalf of the United States. They just, did some horrible things.
Maybe we
Yeah, we'll have some culpability here. Yeah. So in the final days of the war in 2021, as Kabul was falling, about 10,000 Zero unit members and their families were evacuated to the U.S., according to various news reports. And then the scandal since seems to have been that the U.S. government said to them, like, best of luck fending for yourself in the United States. A refugee resettlement volunteer told NPR that Lochinwall started out hopeful and outgoing in 2023. A refugee resettlement volunteer told NPR that Lochinwall started out hopeful and outgoing, but by 2023, he couldn't find work. He felt culturally isolated. He withdrew from his family, started going on these weird, like, long drives across the country. And this person said they tried to get him help, but there was just little infrastructure or support or services. And then Rolling Stone reported that another guy in Lochinwall's unit says that Lochinwall felt abandoned by the CIA, and that in June, he asked people at this special CIA program that was supposed to help Zero unit members for help, and he just got no response. Just they didn't reply to him. So, Ben, I'll stop there, but, like, the immigration fallout, like the impact on, like, the entire country of Afghanistan, the collective punishment, it is, it's devastating.
It's devastating. Look, there's so many dimensions to this. One thing I want to say is, and it's not just because this is what Republicans would do if there's a Democratic president. I did not see many people point out, this is a horrible fucking tragedy. Like, this is horrible for the family of the woman who was killed. Those National Guard people shouldn't have been there. And the fact of the matter is, if Donald Trump didn't deploy the National Guard pointlessly to Washington, D.C., Sarah Beckstrom, the woman who was killed, would be alive today. And we hesitate to make those arguments because we're Democrats and
I agree.
The red hand alert that's going off here on civility. But that is the fact. Like, that woman should have been in West Virginia. And so they can, obviously the shooter is to blame for pulling the trigger and killing the woman and should be held accountable. But we can also say, as a matter of policy, the National Guard never should have been there. On what happened, it has nothing to do with, like, as you pointed out, this is about both the refugee resettlement infrastructure that kind of failed, but also we train these people to do these things. Like, I mean, I think I mentioned this book I read, Fort Bragg Cartel, that came out by, I think, the same Rolling Stone reporter. But it details a lot of murders that have happened because of the degree of violence and trauma that our special operators, many of whom were also kicking down doors in Afghanistan, went through for so many years. If anything, we created these Zero units, and we created this kind of violence machines. And of course, we're not having a conversation about that because Americans are not self-reflective about these things. But that's another piece of this story too, right? Is that, when you have 20 years of war, individuals, whether they are white or brown, American or Afghan or whatever they are, some people are going to react in different ways to that degree of trauma. The last thing I'd say, the dumbest thing to do would then, not dumbest, the cruelest thing to do is then just to say, well, we're going to kick out all these Afghans? Really? I mean, we don't do this. How many white men who are alienated have shot people up in this country? we don't kick out the white men, when they do it, and so let's see this for what it is, which is they take any pretext they can. Any high-profile crime committed by any immigrant becomes a basis to collectively punish all immigrants. And I don't believe that all people of any nationality, background, religion are more or collectively guilty for what they're, I wouldn't think it was fair if a white guy named Ben committed a crime that all the white Bens got, kicked out of this. But this is a crazy way of thinking. And it's sad that it's so normal that we just assumed as soon as this happened, of course, now they're going to come after all the Afghans. But we should be saying that's wrong. And by the way, we should be willing to stand up and fight for this because we were in that country for 40 years, starting with the creation of the Mujahideen that became the Taliban, Al-Qaeda in the Reagan years, and then 20 years of occupation. I'm sorry, there's such a thing as a debt to some people, and not just the people that served with us, but the kind of women that were activists who can't go back. So I hope that there's in communities people that will defend the kind of families that are going to be targeted for this, because a lot of them, they're veterans who know them and can vouch for them.
Yeah, look, just on the political point, I mean, yes, those National Guard members should never have been deployed to D.C. on this made-up mission. Also, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, approved Lochinwall's asylum application in April of 2025. So he was vetted by the Trump administration as well. So they want to make this all about Biden. But that's just bullshit. It's also just, this was not about vetting. This is a guy who clearly suffered some sort of deep psychological break, possibly
that's what I'm
in response to the missions he was asked to do.
Yeah.
Because the zero unit tempo of operations was way surpassed even U.S. Special Forces. These guys were going out on night raids literally every night for a decade, 15 years.
Which in its own way is a dehumanizing thing to do to people.
Yeah. It's awful
to use them like that.
But again,
it doesn't absolve them of his responsibility. It really doesn't. But it does. We have to understand that the war on terror has a very long tail.
Well, also in the wake of a tragedy, it benefits no one to not name the right problem and to just address the wrong things. We already have the travel ban already says there's a near total restriction on the entry of people from Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. What do they have in common? Yeah. Partial restrictions on Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela.
Laos is my favorite.
Yeah,
I mean, just another country we drop bombs on. The dangerous Lao are coming here. We're really scared about that.
Right. I mean, this guy. I mean, he's a killer. He will be prosecuted. He will go to jail. He has 5 kids.
Yeah.
NBC reported that as of this summer, there's 3,000 members of these zero units who are just stuck in legal limbo with no work permits. Are we going to send them back to Afghanistan? Because the Taliban will execute them.
Those guys, yeah.
So it's just a horrible situation all around.
Or are we going to, I mean, what we're doing is not the right way to handle this.
No, what we're doing is terrible. All right, so 2 stories out of South Africa that we wanted to flag, Ben. So last week we talked about how the U.S. boycotted the G20 in South Africa because Trump was mad about a non-existent genocide against white people. Right before that meeting happened, the U.S. did this kind of Hail Mary last-minute request to ask the South African government, President Cyril Ramaphosa, to allow this low-level U.S. official to participate in the event, because normally there's a formal handoff between the current host country and the next host country. Ramaphosa said no. So Trump now says that South Africa won't be invited to the G20 next year, which is in the United States. The funny thing about this is Ramaphosa was like, actually, we're going to be there. Did you see this?
Yeah,
it's no, we're going to go.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll look forward to that. I guess maybe we'll block his entry. Also, Ben, we had to flag this crazy story about the daughter of the former South African president, Jacob Zuma. She has been accused of tricking men into fighting for the Russian government against Ukraine. Did you see the story?
Yeah.
She reportedly told 17 South African men that they're going to go to Russia, you're going to get some security training for a year, then you come back home, you'll get a great job. Instead, these guys got 6 weeks of training, and then they were handed over to the Wagner Group and sent to the front lines in Donetsk. And 8 of them are members of the Zuma family. So she was doing this to her own family. The daughter's name is Dudizile Zuma Sambudla. She is apparently one of Zuma's 20 kids from 6 wives. Busy dude. Until recently, she was a member of parliament in her dad's political party, but she recently resigned because of this scandal. I just never heard of anything quite like this.
I mean, Zuma, famously corrupt, and also, charged with
Real
pretty
creep,
serious
yeah.
sexual assault. So not a good guy. But again, to the common theme of corruption, I'm sure Wagner, she's on some take. This is the common problem everywhere. Like different political systems, different continents. There's a level of corruption in the world right now that is just gross, and there's got to be a global anti-corruption populism here that can link us with the South Africans, with the with everybody, because this is fucking gross. That's a fucking terrible story.
Terrible story. 8 members of your own family.
Yeah.
All right, let's end this with talking about America's most insecure man. We were, of course, talking about FBI Director Kash Patel. So longtime listeners know that Kash has his job because he kissed Trump's ass and is willing to do or say anything Trump wants. Kash literally wrote a children's book where Trump was the king. Then he wrote another book, ostensibly for adults, where Kash laid out Trump's enemies list. But things have been going very poorly for Kash over at the FBI. He's been criticized for excessive use of the FBI's personal jets for travel to see his girlfriend, including staying at a low-rent wrestling match. He took the FBI plane to a place literally called the Boondoggle Ranch for a quick vacation.
Place that actually exists.
Yeah. Shockingly owned by a Trump donor, I think. And then it gets worse. So the New York Post obtained a report that was put together by what they describe as a, quote, alliance of active duty and retired agents and analysts who talked to like 24 FBI sources. And it is absolutely brutal. So I'm going to just basically read some quotes from the Post story.
Which is wonderful.
Have you had time to read the whole 115-page document?
No, but I read a good chunk of it. It made me feel better.
I might just go to sleep with that in my my little Kindle tonight. So here's some of the stuff it says. It says Patel is in over his head, and that his deputy Dan Bongino is something of a clown. These are quotes, by the way. The FBI is described as a rudderless ship and all fucked up. One person says Patel, quote, has neither the breadth of experience nor the bearing an FBI director needs to be successful. This is a verbatim line from the story, Ben. Another source, a self-professed Trump supporter, said Patel is not very good, may be insecure, and lacks the requisite experience or the measured self-confidence to be FBI director. Yeah, no shit. A lot of this is ground we've covered on the show. FBI agents were furious at Patel for tweeting factually wrong things about the investigation into the Charlie Kirk shooting. They think that Patel and Bongino care too much about social media and their own PR and their own brand. But there's one incredible new anecdote that we have to discuss. So the day after the Charlie Kirk shooting, Kash flew to Provo, Utah, to be on the ground pretending to manage the investigation. Remember the night before he was at some fancy restaurant like Rouse or something? Yeah. To me, that's like a tomato sauce. Rouse, same place?
It's like this famously hard to get into place on the up in Harlem in New York that Bill Clinton was there with like Harvey Weinstein, like right after Hillary. Anyway, it's a New York institution, but I've not been there.
Good time was had by all. That's where I think
that's
Kash
where
was tweeting.
Eric Adams used to go, and he said he was a vegetarian. He'd go and order like meat. There's a lot of stories that lead back to Rouse. Like I think like that guy Bo Dietl is always there.
Oh yeah,
it's that kind of place. If you know who Bo Dietl is,
old school.
Like that's kind of who's eating at Rouse.
Okay. So I think Rouse is where it was at a Rouse dinner table where Kash Patel sent the like inaccurate tweet about arresting Kirk's killer when they hadn't yet. So according to this report, though, so Kash Patel flies to Provo, Utah, so he could be on the ground, so he can show up at the press conferences. But he refuses to get off the FBI plane because he doesn't have his special FBI jacket. Apparently, he forgot his jacket, maybe because he was up in New York at Rouse, and he wouldn't get off the plane without one. So the FBI had to scramble and try to find one for him, a size medium jacket. Sure. So they were calling like the Salt Lake City field office. Those guys are trying to work this case. They're searching for a jacket. And now I'm just going to read to you from the Post story, Ben. When a jacket belonging to a female agent was delivered to Patel on the plane, he complained that two areas on the upper sleeves did not have Velcro patches attached. Patel would not leave the plane until he had 2 patches to cover those areas, so members of an FBI SWAT team took patches off their uniforms and ran those patches over to Patel at the airport. The patches were then attached to the loaner FBI raid jacket, and Patel disembarked from the plane. Patel, quote, did not make a positive impression, said Alpha 99. I think Alpha 99 was like the code name for this specific source. Ben, I want to stop there. First of all, just like shout out to this leaker. for going to the New York Post first with this story, because they're going to play it right. And also, like, Trump is going to read this. Bo Dietl's going to read this.
Yes. Well, when the Murdoch New York Post is publishing stuff like this, it's like when the music is starting to play you off. This is not a New York Times thing. That detail is so good because he's clearly such like a petulant, insecure child.
Diva.
Like, I need the patches and I need the to walk off the plane and look like a tough guy.
It's like me fighting with my daughter to get ready for school.
Yeah.
She's almost 3.
Well, it's just it is so unbelievably embarrassing that this person is in charge of the FBI. And I'll say this, like, I'm not like one of these people that's going to sit here and, make a lengthy Atlantic magazine kind of tribute to the deep state and, profess the nobility of every person that's ever been like a CIA officer. We made that mistake a little bit in the first Trump term. I will say this, though. It's just a fundamental misreading of human psychology to think people that work in the FBI are proud to work at the FBI. You don't have to think that they're like they walk on air and commit mistakes. And people that work in the military are proud to be in the military. People work at the DEA are proud to be at the DEA, right? When you pardon drug traffickers that it took the DEA and DOJ years to prosecute, probably a bunch of Republicans, hard asses, like, they feel humiliated. When you make some career FBI badass, who's, again, probably Republican, come take off their patches so little Kash can have his Make-A-Wish moment as a director. By the way, I saw that was in the document. We've been calling him Make-A-Wish FBI director here. So we were ahead of the curve. But the point I'm making is that they're beginning, the deep staters are gone, right? Like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are not the FBI anymore. Like, the people they don't like are gone. And what they fundamentally don't understand is that people who've dedicated their lives to an institution are actually proud of that institution more than they care about Kash Patel or Donald Trump.
Right. And they care about the mission.
Even if they're MAGA, like, they care more about the mission and the institution than Kash Patel and Donald Trump. They fundamentally just don't understand that. And this could be the thing that fucks them in the end.
I think so too. I think it's a big deal.
I really believe
it's humiliating.
Because guess what? These people know a lot of secrets,
Yep.
And if they keep treating, common thread on the show too, like treating the military like garbage, passing the buck down there, treating the FBI like garbage, like, those are not the people you want to treat like garbage. And so if you're trying to consolidate like authoritarian power, you don't alienate the very people that you need to accumulate said power.
Yeah, I think the kind of modern description of the deep state is wildly overstated.
Yes, it is.
There was a period of time where there was very much a deep state in this country. There is a permanent national security class of technocratic
they go to like
professional
Aspen's
people.
Security Forum and
or even that, or they're like, the like, what is it, GS-15, high level.
It's both the kind of revolving door, national security elites crowd, and then there's the highest level of civil service. But we're now talking about agents, you know, special agents at the FBI, operators in the military.
Right. And so I don't think those people are like deep state running the country. I do think they work in buildings where you end up having a lot of power and a lot of inertia.
Yeah.
Right. And when your leader is not just like when you're talking about a Hegseth or a Kash Patel, they're like on paper self-evidently not qualified for the job. But then when, a year later, they're acting like fucking clowns and they're getting humiliated in the pages of the New York Post and humiliating you, right? When you're going home to Thanksgiving and everyone is like, what's up with this dipshit you work for who wouldn't put his little FBI patches on and to get off the plane, right? Like, you don't want to be answering questions about that.
He's talking about seeing Charlie Kirk in Valhalla and flying to see his girlfriend on a private jet, It's embarrassing.
Speaking of which, roll the tape.
Lastly, to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
You're not a Viking, sir. You weren't even wearing the coat.
Here's the thing.
Where were the patches?
The people standing behind him look so uncomfortable.
They're just rolling their eyes.
They're just kind of got their heads down.
This guy sucks so bad.
This is so embarrassing that we have to sit here. We've got the watch.
What watch?
What is he? You're watching out for like the fucking patch that you want to put on
Seiko? What are you talking about, buddy?
And the backup is Bongino. I mean, like, the amazing thing about this whole situation is that the backup, the guy that's going to come in for the bullpen, is an even crazier podcaster.
You got this guy whose head looks like Minecraft, just like raging in the background, trying to clean up Kash Patel's. Oh, they did insert. Remember, they installed like
the second
number two deputy to take over. I don't know. Listen, part of this desire, I do want him gone. I'm with you on the content. I do worry that they're listening and rifling through our.
Oh yeah, they don't like us. They don't like this. But I mean, Bongino and Kash Patel go in there every day and like, who does number 2 work for?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's all this other stuff in there about like, I think some FBI agents like Quantico were making fun of Kash for wanting a sidearm, and then he was like polygraphing the dudes to see who's making fun of him. Like,
it's not going to work. You're going to lose in the end. You're not going to beat the FBI, bro. I'm sorry.
They're going to be there after you're gone, buddy.
They're going to have the watch.
Ask Hoover.
They will have the fucking watch.
Okay, that was necessary and cathartic. We're going to take a quick break, but when you come back, you're going to hear Ben's interview about what it was like to be a journalist in Russia as the full-scale invasion happened, about getting attacked by Putin and driven out and having your friends and your loved ones targeted and punished. So stick around for that. Pod Save the World is brought to you by American Giant. I've got some T-shirts I bought 3 cities ago. And you know what? I love them, and I will never throw them out. I'm going to wear them into the ground because a lot of the stuff you buy these days does not last, and we want that money to go further. American Giant's clothes, however, work harder and are wearable for years to come, ensuring you get layers you can count on for seasons to come. Their greatest hoodie ever made is made from the highest quality materials that are cut and sewn right here in the United States, so you're investing right back into your local supply chain. As the seasons shift and get cooler, stock your closet with durable layers that are built to last from American Giant. So I bought a bunch of stuff from American Giant. I have some really comfortable sweatpants. I got a great sweatshirt. I've got a hoodie. I've got T-shirts, just tons of stuff. It is super comfortable. It's thick. It's durable. It's high quality. They look good. I get compliments. And they've got a wide range of looks, from the greatest hoodie ever made to everyday pieces designed for everyday life. They've got fleece to knit stuff, all in seasonal colors for versatile daily wear. Their men's crew neck is made in Los Angeles, and it's easy to layer on top of tees or under a heavy coat. Choosing American Giant means taking a stand for hardworking people, local communities, and quality clothes. Through American ingenuity and innovation, they're going against the current and doing better. They believe that small changes add up to something big, a new kind of conscious buying. Get 20% off your first order when you use the promo code WORLD at american-giant.com. That's 20% off when you use the promo code WORLD at american-giant.com. This podcast is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform designed to elevate your online presence and drive your success. Squarespace provides all the necessary tools to claim your domain, build a professional website, expand your brand, and facilitate payments, making it the ideal solution for businesses of all sizes. Squarespace gives you everything you need to offer services and get paid all in one place. From consultations to events and experiences, showcase your offerings with a customizable website designed to attract clients and grow your business. Start with Blueprint AI, Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder, to get a fully custom website in just a few steps, using basic information about your industry, goals, and personality to generate premium quality content and personalized design recommendations. Squarespace makes it easy to showcase your expertise and engage clients with video content on your website. Upload and organize your videos, create stunning video libraries, and even monetize your content by adding a paywall, perfect for online courses, exclusive tutorials, and premium workshops. Squarespace Domains makes it easy to find the best name for your business at one fair, all-inclusive price. No hidden fees or add-ons required. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/world to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/world.
So we've talked a lot over the last few years about the crackdown on both journalism and civil society in Russia. There is a new award-winning documentary that gives audiences a front row seat to what life was like for independent journalists in Russia in the lead up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and some of the aftermath. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by Julia Loktev, who's the director of My Undesirable Friends, which is currently in select theaters. Look for it in streaming in the months to come, as well as Ksenia Mironova, who's a Russian journalist for TV Rain. Julia, Ksenia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Ben.
Okay, so Julia, to start here, this is a really long and intimate look into the lives of a number of journalists. You shot this on an iPhone, which kind of contributes to the intimacy of the film. and it's something you kind of can't look away from. You get inside the lives of these people. I wanted to ask you, as with any documentary like this, I'm always curious about why you chose to go to Russia and tell this story, and if you, when you knew the kind of story you were trying to tell in filming with your iPhone.
Well, it was kind of incredible because I didn't know what the film would turn into when I started filming it. I should say I'm originally from the Soviet Union. I came to the States as a child at 9, so I kept up on Russia, but I hadn't lived there since I was 9 years old, but obviously kept up on what was happening. And in the summer of 2021, Russia started declaring journalists as foreign agents. And I thought this was really strange when, media and also individuals have to put basically a disclaimer saying this is brought to you by a foreign agent on everything they do. Like if we were doing this podcast and you were a foreign agent, and you would have to say like, hi, I'm Ben Rhodes and I'm a foreign agent and this podcast is a foreign agent. And if we happen to be a foreign agents on your show, then you would have to say, well, this is Julia Loktev, she's a foreign agent, and this is Ksenia Mironova, she's a foreign agent. And, this was happening everywhere in Russian independent media that, by New Year's Eve, of 2021, it felt like every other word was who we must say is a foreign agent, because Russia was increasingly targeting civil society journalists. So that's what we began making the film with Anna Nemzer, who was a host at what was Russia's last remaining independent TV channel. We thought when journalists are forced to, in effect, shame themselves, supposedly, and mark themselves as other, as not belonging to this society, something is happening. What we had no idea of course, is that this was leading up to Russia starting a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And everybody thought that this was kind of leading to an increased crackdown on journalists and an increased internal crackdown. But no one was expecting the kind of war that Russia has now been waging for 4 years.
And how did you select the journalists that you're going to profile? And we should say, it's in addition to being kind of independent journalists, you focus on women journalists. How did you choose the people that would be kind of our guides through this world?
We didn't actually intend to make it a film about women. It kind of happened that way. When we started, there were only 25 individual foreign agents. Some of them weren't journalists. Some of them worked for Radio Liberty. We thought, fair enough. And then there were a few very young, vibrant women, because part of how this works is that for Terror to work, they didn't start with the most important journalists when they named, the foreign agents. In fact, we picked Yelena Kostyuchenko, who is Russia's best known long-form writer in the independent journalism world, because we thought she'd be named a foreign agent any moment now. Well, she just got named a foreign agent 2 weeks ago, I think. And part of how Terror works is it has to be random. So we started with people who were on the list, who were on the foreign agent list. And then Anna, who was a co-director also, who was an anchor at TV Rain, and which was a foreign agent. She's still personally not a foreign agent. And then Ksenia, whose partner, when she was 22, was arrested, and she can speak to that more, and is now a journalist who is sitting in jail in Russia, in prison for 22 years for so-called supposed treason.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of window into the consequences that people can face, including detention, which we can get to. Ksenia, I wanted to start by asking you, though, it's been risky to be a journalist, particularly a kind of independent journalist in Russia for a long time now. There have been journalists who've been murdered, disappeared. What motivated you to go into journalism in the first place, and how did you think about those risks as you started out in your career?
I was born in Urals. It's like near Siberia. No one in my family ever was a journalist or even worked with journalists. I always loved writing, and I always loved telling stories. I think I just always wanted to be a journalist, but I never expected to be a political journalist or to write about different social issues. But I graduated from the high school at a time where it was already almost impossible to write about something else. So it actually happened very natural. I just saw what's happening around. I just saw people protesting. I saw people being arrested because of their views I've never seen something different. I've never seen, like a beautiful democracy or something. I wanted to be a journalist, and it was like, oh, a lot going on around, and I can write about it.
Well, during this time, when you were a journalist at TV Rain, when Julie's filming, your fiance is detained. It's not really an explanation why, and it's been sentenced to 22 years in prison. Can you talk a little bit about that case? What you understand about what happened, why it happened, and what it was like to go through that?
Yes, well, we've met when we both worked in this Commerçant newspaper, and at that time, like now, this is a very controlled media, but at that time it was not like this. I've never faced some kind of control when I worked there. And I wrote about different social issues and protest and educational system in Russia, and he wrote about military and how what's Russia doing in Syria, about Ukraine since 2014. And he investigated some of these things, and as we know from his case, FSB followed him, and like for the last almost 8 or 7 years. So they just followed him, they read all of his articles, and they were really, really mad, FSB, and I think then they had this great moment to arrest him. I'm not sure if they have one reason. Like it was not like just one article or just one thing that he said. I think it was there were a lot of reasons why it was good for them to arrest him. And also I think, because I wrote a lot about all of this governmental treason cases, I think that this is how they prepared people and how they prepared this system for the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, because they arrested a lot of scientists. Since like Ivan Safronov, my partner, he was the first case when journalist was arrested, but they also arrested a lot of scientists who worked on different issues connected to war. Then after Ivan, they arrested a lot of other journalists. They arrested a lot of Ukrainians who lived in Russia, and I think it was their way to prepare the system to this war.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, because I remember them also shutting down. I knew some people at Memorial, the civil society organization.
Course, yes.
It just felt like they were preparing something. Sorry,
Yes.
Julia, you wanted to get in and say something?
No, I think what I wanted to say is one of the things that happens in the film is every other journalist at some point mentions Ivan Safronov, Ksenia's partner, and says, oh, or I could end up like this. And so you don't need to arrest every journalist. You don't need to arrest every scientist. The way that terror works is that you can arrest a couple, and then everybody else has that constant fear of there, but for the grace of God go I. And that's what happened, unfortunately, with Ivan Safronov, is that, and as far as I'm aware, and Ksenia, you can correct me, as far as I'm aware, the official reason was the sharing of some information that was actually like publicly available in Wikipedia. I mean, it's
Yes.
something completely like,
Yes.
I mean, what we think the reason for arresting him is one thing, obviously this was all a buildup to the war, but what the official reason is the sharing of something that was actually publicly accessible information and that you can Google.
Well, and Julia, I also want to ask you, there's this, you depict, and we're talking now about this, crackdown, this elimination of any potential, not only, I don't want to say opposition, just independent voices, fact-based, truth-based voices. What part of what, you show is both the dark humor, right, of people who are going through this, and every Russian I know has a capacity for dark humor, but also kind of a sense of incredulity, frustration that, you're in Moscow and some people are being targeted and there's this kind of darkness enveloping them. And yet most people are kind of going around as if nothing is changing, as if, things are fine. as an outsider, as someone who may have been born in the former Soviet Union but is visiting, what did you make of the juxtaposition of here are these people that are going through the most intense form of repression, who are essential to a democratic society or any kind of open society, journalists, and then you walk around the Moscow streets and most people are just acting totally normal.
Absolutely. And this is something I think about now all the time. I think about this in my daily life, why the fabric and surface of my daily life looks really nice and, matcha lattes everywhere. And meanwhile, there's masked men snatching people into unmarked vans, and that the surface of our society right now looks really nice for the most part, while awful things are happening. And there's a moment in the film where actually one of the other characters, Sonia Groisman, is for their podcast. She's interviewing an anthropologist who talks about, that this is actually completely normal in oppressive societies, that for most people in an, authoritarian oppressive society, life looks really nice. Like she says, we think about it as looking like V for Vendetta, but in fact, she talks about how even under Stalin, the trains were running and, even at the same time, things that are contradictory, like the rights of women were expanding, and yet horrible things are happening. And this is something I am constantly coming back to now as we're living through some pretty horrific things.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's when I look at Putin's early years, he went after the television stations, he went after the oligarchs, he went after, the law firms. Right? I mean, like it's eerily familiar playbook. But and Ksenia, I want to ask you, a question that is I've often thought about. I've met a lot of journalists over the years, Russian journalists from kind of independent outlets. But I also, when I was in the White House for 8 years, interacted a lot with kind of state media type journalists or, more official media like, TASS, right? And, they were nice people, interpersonally. I mean, I interacted with some of these people for 8 years. I saw them change their line. They went from being pretty open, accessible people that would report pretty straightforwardly on things, albeit with a Russian bent, to by 2016, they were defending the, Crimea invasion, and they were talking about, how horrible America was. So but interpersonally, they were the same, and my question for you is, did you interact with some of these, quote unquote journalists who are more like in the state media line? Like, what would they tell you privately? Like, was there a sense that, was there any sense of people sharing a profession? And I know this is kind of, I've just always wondered this, like, what is it like if you're an independent journalist? Did you have any interaction with those kind of state media people that are playing by the Kremlin's rules?
I believe that for most of them is just kind of coping mechanism, like especially people who stayed. I don't think that all of them believe in what they write or what they film. I see that for many people it's just, as I said, a coping mechanism. I also don't understand it because, like, so-called propaganda stars like Margarita Simonyan, obviously they got a lot of money for it, but a lot of just regular correspondents, they're also underpaid. So I don't really understand why can you make all of this propaganda news if you even, I don't know, you even didn't get something from it. I think a lot of people just don't think about it. And I think a lot of people just don't think about journalism as and about such an important thing. There are a lot of people who just don't care. And a lot of people who are like, well, I'm not an evil, I'm just doing my job, and it's such a small job. I just write some news. It's not so important, when I believe it is important. Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy for me too.
And I think that's an important feature. I was going to jump in with a little bit quickly. I think actually it's in there is a part 2 to the film that I'm editing now in Exile, and one of the characters says something that I think is important, which is that Putin's propaganda for years wasn't really designed to make you believe in something. It was designed to make you believe in nothing. And because if you believe in nothing, then you do nothing. And that's largely kind of how it seems to work, is that it's not, there are definitely people who are true believers. And I think this is changing now. But I think for a lot of people, it's kind of like the way that Ksenia described it. It's a lack of care.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember Alexei Navalny telling me once that Putin doesn't need to make you believe that he's not corrupt or that he's not a liar. He just makes you believe that everybody's corrupt and everybody's a liar and nothing matters. And so
Absolutely.
don't even care. I mean, I think one of the powerful things, and you mentioned part two, Julia, but I want to ask both of you, and Ksenia, you can go first, this question of whether to leave or not, kind of haunts the experience that we go through. And you struggle with that idea. I mean, nobody wants to leave their home. You also are leaving behind a partner, and your leaving could be used against him. Ultimately, you made that choice to leave, as did other people in the film, other journalists. Just tell us a little bit about that decision, why you decided to leave, how difficult that was.
Well, as you've seen in the movie, it was such a hard choice. And I never thought I can do it. I believe this is a very personal choice. I think we discuss it a lot with Julia, with our friends from Iran, for example. And I would never judge people who left or people who stayed, because people have very, very different reasons. Like, people who stayed have their families, have their grandparents or something else. In my case, why I decided to leave, it was just that I was like, it's too much to have two political prisoners in your family, because it's also like, people think, as Julia said, people think about these things like about V's Vendetta, but in reality, like, it's very expensive to have a political prisoner in your family. It's very hard. Bureaucracy, lawyers, money. So for me, it was just, I don't want to make more problems for my and his families. So it's better to leave and to check what's going on. And maybe then at that time, I thought that maybe I can return. But yeah, for me, it was a very banal reason. But I think for some of our colleagues, it was just so important to stay in the field, to continue their work, and for me too. And it was only possible if you are somewhere else, not inside of Russia. Because we tried, as Julia showed in the movie, we tried to stay, on TV Rain, we tried this first days of the war, we were trying to stay. We were like, okay, we will try to follow all of these rules, but couple of days after, we realized that it's impossible.
Julia, you're both showing this incredibly historic moment in time, right? The bridge between the days leading up to the full-scale invasion and the immediate aftermath, but you're also making a film that Americans are going to watch. I don't want to. There are all these parallels that we can see. I don't want to overstate them, because, it's not like journalists here are being disappeared yet. But what was it like to edit this film and release it in a year during which the President of the United States routinely calls journalists the enemy of the people? They've kicked out the Pentagon press corps and have basically a state media of kind of far right influencers that are now at the Pentagon. They've sued media organizations, so they've started down the path. They have their own friendly oligarchs who are buying up the media, and we should call it that. We should talk about the U.S. like we talk about Russia. The regime friendly oligarchs are essentially taking over the media. How do you think about the parallels?
Well, you're right that I did end up kind of capturing, unwittingly, I have to say, this historic moment, because, a million people left. And the only reason I ended up capturing all of this live, through these people, we lived through them, is that I started by not ignoring the warning signs. Now, of course, there were even earlier warning signs. And if you look at Russia, they didn't start by arresting journalists. They started by suing journalists, libel, all those things that are, lawsuits, looking into people's taxes, looking into and this, and not just journalists, but, civil society. If you look at even if you look at how Alexei Navalny was originally arrested, it's always on some bureaucratic thing. It's one of the characters, Anya, in the film says, Putin's favorite phrase is, it's all within the framework of the law.
Well, like these mortgage, going after
Like the mortgage
Tish James
thing.
over mortgages.
Absolutely. This mortgage stuff. So I finished the film. It premiered at the New York Film Festival a year ago. So it's not so much what happened in the editing, but what's happened to the film and how it's played in our heads as Americans, And I'm very much like an inside-outside person in this film. I mean, I'm an American citizen. I know Russia very well, kind of having been born there especially, but I'm American. So many things that just, were little throwaways in the film, whether it's like at some point someone's like, oh, the end of comedy shows, the comedy show gets shut down. Or there's a mention, of a university rector being arrested. Or there's, when you mentioned Memorial gets shut down under the pretext of, why must we talk about we won World War II? Why must we talk about our unpleasant history? Can't we just talk about the nice things? And I look at Trump and the Smithsonian. And there's so many things that, I edited just thinking it was a film about Russia. I wasn't thinking of all the parallels, the parallels kind of sadly came after. And it keeps it feels like, there's different details. I don't know what Easter egg will be in the film for us tomorrow, that will resonate. But it really wasn't, they weren't resonating as much when I was editing it as it's just happened since. And I'd rather they didn't.
Well, it's yet another reason why people should see this. Because it's both a window into Russia and maybe a window into ourselves. Ksenia, I wanted to ask you one last question, which is, I often check myself, right? I think it's wrong to demonize a whole people because of what its government is doing, even though I do think, people bear some responsibility. And frankly, in this country, we bear plenty of responsibility. We've elected Donald Trump twice. But as someone who's outside of Russia now in this kind of exile community, what is do you have any hope or how do you about the future of Russia? Like how would you want people to understand that there is a diversity of view among Russians and that hopefully can find some expression at some point in the future?
Yeah. Well, about future, I just have to say, we don't think about it at all. I mean, maybe some people do, but me and my friends and my colleagues, we just don't. I think we just, we are very focused on what's going on right now. And I think this is the only way to survive, because you can just go crazy if you think about future. Like, I mean, how can I think about future of Russia when I'm Gen Z? I was born with Putin. I lived my whole life with him. I don't believe that tomorrow something happens. And even if something happens to him, I don't believe that everything will change in a moment, obviously. So I think I'm just so focused on my work and what I can do right now and how I can help Ukrainians, how can I help Russians who are imprisoned because of their views. And I think with all of my Russian friends and colleagues, we always remember these words of people who survived in World War II, and that people who thought about what they lost and people who always thought about their future, they just went crazy, and only people who focused on their job right now survived. And this is what we're all doing right now. And about people who, what I think about people who stayed, we obviously feel very divided, people who left and people who stayed, but I know that obviously there are a lot of people who like Putin, who make money on this war, but I also know that some of my brilliant friends who stayed in Russia, they work anonymously as journalists. They help finding and they help to save Ukrainian children, and they work with Ukrainian organizations and help them looking for all of these children. There are people who helped political prisoners even if it's really dangerous for them. There are people who send letters to political prisoners or send food, and people who still protest even. And I just want to appreciate them because it's really dangerous for them. And that's great that they're still doing it.
Yeah, no, that they're risking everything. Well, Julia, last word to you. I mean, how is this making this film, editing this film, releasing this film, and all these crazy times we're in? How has that changed you?
I just feel incredibly honored that I got to share these incredibly difficult years with characters, because it's not a normal documentary where you have experts like telling you, here's, even here, Ksenia's playing the role of expert and she's explaining things. But in the film, it's like we're hanging out at kitchen tables, we're in taxis, you're really living through it. And for me, it was so important to be able to tell a story of what does it feel like to be living under a government that you oppose? What is that experience? And to suddenly, in the course of my film, all of the characters in the film had to flee their country, usually with like a carry-on suitcase and a few hours notice. And then I continued, there's a part 2 where I follow them in exile. And I just feel like I got to create a historical document, but just through people you come to know. And it's like we were talking to a critic in LA and he said, oh, this is a hangout film kind of. And it is.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I think it's a new genre, maybe the hangout tragedy rather than the hangout comedy, although there is, a fair bit of dark humor in it. So I just feel incredibly honored to be able to tell this story.
Well, everybody, should keep an eye out for My Undesirable Friends. I imagine you're going to be hearing more about it. And I want to thank you, Julia, for making the film, and Ksenia for all your work and your colleagues. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for having us.
Thank you to Julia and Ksenia for doing the show. Thank you to Kash Patel for making us laugh.
I hope he hangs on for a little while because it's
good people at the Post.
Good segment every week.
I hope this random group makes some more reports. Leak it to us.
Yeah.
It's not classified.
Here,
help me out.
Don't. Yeah.
You know our emails.
Yeah. You know our emails. Yeah. You know our emails.
All right. Talk to you guys next week.